Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with mental health advocate and writer Maggie Kelly. She is a writer who focuses on mental health and personal development. After a 7th grade course in biology, she became fascinated with genetics and what shapes a human. She decided to learn all about the human psyche and obtained a BS in psychology. Maggie has struggled herself with depression since her young teens. Her life trajectory changed after having a psychotic break and hitting rock bottom at 26. Following a 3-month stint in a mental hospital, she found the help she needed. It inspired her first book, Recovering from Depression. Enjoy this interview.
Good. Well, thank you for taking a minute after the show today. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I can't imagine anything that's probably been more under the microscope during this pandemic and post-pandemic period of our existence than mental health. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But before we do, I'm curious how you survived this 3-year pandemic window now that the world's waking up, and how it's changed the way that you approach things now.
It's really changed everything in my life. Before the pandemic, I struggled a lot with depression. And that was only exacerbated by COVID. I feel like none of us really got out of that unscathed. Like, we all went through our own personal health. But COVID for me was kind of like the icing on top of a very traumatic decade. I had a lot of crap happen, and then with COVID, I finally broke and had a psychotic break. It was very scary, and I ended up being in the mental hospital and living there for about 3 months while I was just completely mentally unstable.
So how did you get out of it? What was kind of the way that, you rebounded and kind of got yourself into a better space?
So I went through something called ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy. A lot of people probably know it as shock therapy, and it's actually not as scary as people make it out to be. A lot of the times, when you say shock therapy, people think of like those awful 1900 movies where people are like strapped into a chair, electrocuted while they're awake, and it's just horrible. It's actually very peaceful. They put you to sleep, and then they induce many seizures in your brain. And you're under a paralytic, so your body doesn't see, so it's just your brain that they focus on. And I needed that because I was kind of trapped in this weird loop. And the only way to get out of it, the only way to break it, was through ECT. And so once I did that, I was able to slowly recover and get out of it and move forward in my life into a much healthier and much happier place.
So to get a better handle on what you do for a living, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 3rd graders at a career day. One of the kids is going to look up at you and say, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
The short answer is that I write stories about the world that help people feel less alone. The longer answer is I basically write about everything that inspires me. This past year, I've been writing a lot about mental health and personal development because that's where I've been at personally. But I also love fiction worlds. And so I'm so inspired by things like Harry Potter or Narnia or the series of unfortunate events because it's so fascinating to explore those kinds of worlds. And it's bizarre to me that there are over 7 billion people in this world, each and every one of them unique and with their own individual story. And I find that fascinating. And to not want to hear the stories would seem silly because all the stories are so amazing.
Absolutely, I agree. So when you were in the 3rd grade, when you were a kid, what was your dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
That's a great question. When I was in third grade, I really wanted to be a musician. More specifically, I wanted to be a pop star because I had just moved from Louisiana to South Carolina, and it was a very tough move for me. So I found a home in music that just helped me find peace with myself. And so I have always turned to music in like my darkest periods of life. And so I wanted to pursue that for a long time. And I eventually decided I just wanted to have it for me because it was a personal experience and not something that I needed to share. I needed to share it with myself.
So let's go back to your childhood and kind of talk to me a little bit about how these seeds began that became and grew into who you are as a writer. How did all that happen?
I had a very good childhood. I was a very headstrong little individual, and I was very determined. I would often do whatever I wanted, and I was very spirited. So I was always exploring like creative things, and it's followed through me throughout my life that I've continued to be a creative individual, and I've pursued creative endeavors everywhere I go. I started my own business at 17. I wrote my own book. I've written some music, but I've never actually published it. I've explored drawing. All of those seeds that I had in childhood have really allowed me to bloom into the creative person I am today.
You know, there's always that book when you're a kid that you read that either makes you want to read more, it opens that door to liking and loving reading, or makes you want to be a writer. What was that book for you?
Probably Harry Potter. I was probably around 7 or 8 when I started reading the series. And I'm a person who really likes magic and the idea of magic. So reading it made me feel like special and unique, even though like I know that all kids were feeling that way. But it really opened like my eyes to what it would be like to write that kind of story for someone else.
So we have all of these motivators that make us, you know, be who we are and overcome and achieve and do all of these things. What is it for you every day that propels you, that makes you be the best that you can be?
Life. It's really funny because before COVID and before my mental break, I was in a really dark place, and like I said to myself, I didn't want to be alive. But after that, I found a whole new appreciation for the fact that I am alive and I get to wake up every day and feel amazing things and do amazing things. And yes, there are some really crummy things that happen, but I'd rather feel them than never feel them again.
That's great. How do you quantify your day? How do you get to the end of the day and say, hey, that worked for me?
I normally just feel content. I've been writing so much, and since I'm pursuing the things that I love, I feel like a huge sense of satisfaction from that.
So at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of? What is it that you've done that you're the proudest that you've done?
I'm probably proudest of my book. It took a long time in the making, but some of it was from articles I wrote online, and then I pieced them together and added more to it. So my book is a piece of me, and I'm really proud of how it came together, and I am so happy with how it turned out.
So as I mentioned at the top, in this modern world of post-COVID, mental health has become something that's not taboo or something that people are afraid to talk about. Has that made things easier for you to cope and to heal and to get to where you need to be?
As we start to talk about it more as a society, I think it is really helpful. There's still a lot to be said and done in the regards of mental health, but I think we're making progress. And with COVID opening up the door of mental health conversations, I think that's really important because so many people are struggling with it, and we need ways to understand it and not feel alone in that.
So if you could go back in your life to a much younger portion of your life and who you are, and you could give your young version a piece of advice based on the roads you've been down so far, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I would probably tell my younger self to stop worrying so much about what other people are doing and to just stay true to her own path. When I was younger, I always had a hard time feeling like I fit in and like I was a part of anything. So I would tell her that she's not alone and that she is loved and that she just needs to keep going because things do get better.
So everyone out there has a perception or an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your readers, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
That's an interesting question. I was once asked by my English teacher, "Who are you?" And my immediate response was, "I am not a label." So I don't think humans can really be boxed into these ideas. I think that I'm a very dynamic being who gets to explore a lot of different things. And I think that I am a creative and loving individual who appreciates the world.
So Maggie, if anyone out there wants to get the book, they want to learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where is the best place for them to go on the web?
The best place to go would be Amazon, and you can look up my book, Recovering from Depression, on there.
Well, Maggie, hey, thank you very much for opening up. I have an 18-year-old who's on the autism spectrum, so I've been going through, various therapies and I've been in the special needs community, and I think it's really important to have awareness. I know in that community it's really big to have an advocate and have awareness, and I think these conversations and getting things out there of overcoming mental hurdles, so to speak, that we go through in our lives is a pretty big deal. So good luck with everything. Thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good week.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, music, and mental health from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.